It was just another morning at Cedar Ridge Elementary, until a veteran father arrived at the school gates and saw what no parent should ever see. His disabled daughter stood trembling and helpless on her crutches in the middle of the schoolyard, while a group of students laughed and poured soda all over her loyal German shepherd. The dog didn't fight back. He simply stood there, shielding her as the sticky rain fell. But what happened next would change everything. For the bullies, for the teacher who turned away, and for the father who had already fought too many battles to let his little girl face one alone. Stay with us until the end of this story to witness how far a father's love can go. And if you believe that a father's love is the strongest shield a child can ever have, hit subscribe and be part of our stories of love and courage. Wishing you a peaceful day filled with kindness and hope. The morning sun lay gently across the courtyard of Cedar Ridge Elementary, tinting the playground with soft golden light. It was the kind of quiet morning that usually carried the sound of children's laughter, the rustle of backpacks, and the scrape of sneakers on pavement. But today, that laughter sounded wrong, too loud, too sharp. By the flagpole, a group of older students gathered in a tight half-circle, their shadows stretching long across the bricks. In the middle stood Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd, strong but gentle, his sable coat glistening under a steady stream of dark soda pouring from a plastic bottle. The liquid hissed and bubbled, sliding down his fur in sticky lines pooling at his feet. "Look at that! The robot's bodyguard!" one boy shouted, and the others burst into laughter that felt colder than the morning air. From across the courtyard, Emily Carter, 8 years old, small and pale under the sunlight, moved as fast as her crutches would allow. Her navy blue school uniform brushed against her knees as she hurried forward, her left prosthetic leg glinting faintly beneath the hem of her skirt. Her blonde hair fell across her face as she stumbled once, then caught herself and kept going. "Stop! Leave him alone!" she cried, her voice breaking halfway between anger and fear. The laughter only grew. One of the boys tilted the bottle again, letting the soda rain over Rex's back. "Relax, robot girl," another sneered. "He's fine. See? He doesn't even care." Rex stood still. He didn't growl or bark. Instead, he stepped sideways, positioning himself between Emily and the group, head lowered, amber eyes alert. He trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. His training, his loyalty, every instinct told him to protect, but he waited for her command. Emily reached for his leash, her small hand shaking. The boys laughed again, and one shoved her shoulder. The motion was careless, a burst of mockery turned violent. Her right crutch slipped against the wet pavement, and she fell backward. The metallic clang of her prosthetic leg against the ground shattered the laughter into silence. Emily winced. Her palms scraped the brick, and her crutches skittered away. For a moment she just sat there, eyes wide with shock, breath trembling in her chest. The laughter faded into a hush. Rex barked once, deep, sharp, protective, and stepped in front of her, tail down, muscles taut. His bark wasn't aggression, it was warning, the kind of sound that told everyone present that the line had been crossed. Emily blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. Slowly, with both hands, she pushed herself upright. Her right leg wobbled, her left foot of metal clanked lightly on the brick. She stood again, fragile but proud, and bent to retrieve one of her crutches. From the far end of the yard, a sound cut through the stillness, firm, deliberate footsteps, quick but measured. Heads turned, a man in an olive green field jacket was walking swiftly down the path, the morning light glinting off the silver chain that hung around his neck. His face was partly shaded by a black baseball cap embroidered with a single word: veteran. His presence drew quiet even before he reached them. This was Jack Carter, 42 years old, a former soldier, and Emily's father. There was something in the way he moved, the discipline of a man who had lived through command and consequence. His steps didn't thunder, they carried weight. Jack didn't speak at first. His eyes, calm, gray, unreadable, swept across the scene. He saw Emily standing on her crutches, Rex trembling beside her, the sticky soda staining the pavement, and the circle of wide-eyed children frozen in place. For a brief second, something flickered behind his eyes, sorrow first, then restraint. He walked forward until he reached his daughter. "You okay, sweetheart?" he said quietly. Emily nodded, her lips trembling. "I'm fine, Dad," she whispered, though both knew it wasn't true. He knelt for just a moment, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, his hand lingering there. "You're brave," he said softly, "but you should never have to be brave for this." Then he stood and turned to the group. "Who did this?" The question came low and even, but it carried the weight of someone who'd asked far harder questions before. No one answered. One boy shifted, kicking the edge of the puddle. Jack bent and picked up the empty soda bottle from the ground. He turned it slowly in his hand, the morning light catching the last drops of brown liquid. "In the field," he said, voice calm, "we used bottles like this to clean wounds. Out here, you used it to make one." His words fell into the silence like stones dropped into still water. None of the boys spoke, their faces flushed, their breaths shallow. A few feet away stood Noah Matthews, Emily's classmate, an 8-year-old boy with a thin frame, chestnut brown hair, and an earnest face that looked perpetually curious. He had been there since the beginning, clutching his phone nervously, recording from behind a nearby bench. The red light blinked softly as he captured the moment. Rex's stillness, Emily's fall, and now the quiet command of a father's presence. Noah didn't understand why he was filming, only that this mattered. He bit his lip, eyes darting between Jack and the others, sensing that something far bigger than a prank had just unfolded. Jack set the bottle down by his boot and took a step closer to the boys. "You think this is strength?" he asked, his tone still calm but edged with something cold. "You think making someone smaller than you feel fear makes you powerful? You'll learn one day. It does the opposite." One of the boys, the tallest, tried to speak but found no words. The only sound was the faint hum of morning wind through the flagpole ropes. Rex shifted, pressing, against Jack's leg. The old soldier reached down and gave the dog a firm pat. "You did good, buddy," he murmured. Then he turned back to Emily. She was standing now, straight despite the weight of all those eyes on her. Her face was pale, her lips set tight, but her gaze was steady. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come on," he said gently. "We're done here." He took the crutches from her hands, folded them together, and carried them as he guided her toward the exit. Rex followed close behind, his wet fur glinting under the sun. The courtyard stayed silent. The children didn't move. Even the air seemed heavier, as if holding on to the gravity of what had just happened. Jack's voice, calm and low, drifted back over his shoulder as they walked away. "You don't hurt others to feel strong, and you don't stay silent when someone does." It wasn't a threat, just truth, spoken by a man who'd learned it the hard way. At the gate, Emily hesitated and looked back once. Noah lowered his phone and met her gaze. He gave a small nod, a promise, wordless but clear. Jack squeezed her shoulder gently, then led her out into the sunlight. "It's okay, honey," he whispered. "Dad's here." The morning wind lifted the last of the laughter away, leaving behind only silence, the scent of soda, and the echo of a lesson none of them would forget. Night settled quietly over the Carter house, the kind of stillness that holds its breath after a long, heavy day. The light from the porch spilled faintly through the living room window, cutting across the floor where Rex lay stretched beside the couch. His breathing was uneven, shallow, his once glossy coat dulled by the sticky residue that no amount of rinsing seemed to remove. Emily sat cross-legged beside him, her crutches leaned against the wall, a bowl of lukewarm water and a clean towel at her side. She dabbed gently at his back with a soft cloth, her small hands trembling each time he whimpered. His fur, once the proud color of sand and smoke, clung in clumps to his skin. "You're the bravest friend I have," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The words seemed to calm him for a moment. His tail gave the faintest thump against the rug before he drifted into uneasy sleep. The old clock in the hallway ticked toward midnight, and Jack watched from the doorway in silence. His daughter's blonde hair fell over her face as she bent closer to the dog, whispering something he couldn't quite hear. He wanted to tell her to rest, to go to bed, but the sight of her small figure beside that trembling animal stilled him. There was something sacred in that quiet moment, an unspoken understanding between the broken and the loyal. Jack turned away and walked to the kitchen. The faint reflection of his own face in the window startled him for a second. He looked older than 42 tonight, lines carved deeper by helplessness rather than age. By morning, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and soap. Rex had eaten nothing. Emily tried offering him chicken, then water, then his favorite biscuits, but he only licked her fingers weakly. Panic flitted across her face, but she said nothing. Jack crouched beside them, touching Rex's head. His fur was hot under Jack's palm. The old soldier's voice dropped low. "He's burning up," he muttered, mostly to himself. Emily's lip quivered. Jack lifted Rex carefully, feeling the dog's labored breath against his arm. "We're going to the vet," he said. The clinic smelled of bleach and exhaustion. The veterinarian, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes, examined Rex and frowned. "It's a chemical irritation, too much sugar and acid in his skin. He'll recover, but it'll take time." She hesitated before adding, "He must have stayed still a long time for that to happen." Jack nodded once, his jaw tightening. He didn't need the reminder. That afternoon, Jack drove to the school. The sun was bright, but it didn't feel warm. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he parked in front of the main office. Inside, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the faint echo of children's laughter from the halls. Evan Grant, the assistant principal, was standing by the window of his office, a man in his late 30s with carefully parted dark hair and a pressed shirt that always looked too new. His smile was practiced, professional, the kind of expression that existed to smooth over problems rather than solve them. "Mr. Carter," he said, gesturing for Jack to sit. "I heard there was a little incident yesterday. Kids can be rough sometimes, but let's not turn this into something bigger than it is." Jack didn't sit. He placed a folded paper on the desk, the vet's report, and said quietly, "That little incident made my dog sick and nearly knocked my daughter down." Evan sighed, leaned back and crossed his arms. "I understand your concern, but these are children. They didn't mean harm. It's best for everyone if we move on." The words pressed against Jack's patience like a dull knife. He stared at Evan for a long moment, his gray eyes unblinking. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the stillness of warning. "You think it's small because you weren't there. But small things, left alone, kill something inside a child. Respect, courage, trust. Well, once it's gone, you don't get it back." Evan shifted uncomfortably, the smile fading. Jack turned and left before the man could answer. By evening, the mail slot clinked. Jack heard the soft slap of paper against the floor. He bent down and found a single folded note, scrawled in thick marker. "If you keep bringing that dog, you'll regret it." The letters were uneven, the kind written by a trembling hand that mistook fear for power. He stood there for a long moment, the note fluttering slightly between his fingers. Behind him, Emily was feeding Rex pieces of boiled chicken, unaware of what he held. He crumpled the paper and dropped it into the sink without a word. The sound of water running drowned the noise of his thoughts. The next day, the world moved as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, laughter returned to the schoolyard, and the wind carried the smell of chalk and spring grass. But beneath that normalcy, small things began to stir. At the far edge of the school parking lot, Noah Matthews found himself surrounded by 3 boys, the same ones from that courtyard. They blocked his path with nervous grins that didn't reach their eyes. "You filmed it," one said. "Delete it." Noah shook his head, clutching his backpack strap. "I already deleted it," he lied, but the lie came too quick. The red-haired boy stepped forward and pushed him lightly. "Then show us your phone." Noah hesitated, and that was enough. The shove came harder this time. He hit the pavement, palms scraping, but his grip on the phone never loosened. "I said delete it," one shouted. Noah's voice cracked as he said, "I made a copy." The boys stared, uncertain. For a brief moment, something in his defiance unnerved them. Then, muttering curses, they scattered. Noah sat up slowly, clutching his backpack, blood on his palms but a flicker of something stronger in his eyes. At the Carter home, twilight painted the walls in gold and shadow. Jack sat in the garage, the air thick with the smell of old oil and wood polish. On the workbench rested a metal box, worn at the edges, the hinges slightly rusted. He opened it carefully, the lid creaking as it lifted to reveal rows of folded ribbons, medals, and a small silver insignia, tokens from another life. He picked one up between his fingers, the bronze catching the dim light. His reflection wavered in its surface. Across the room an old photo hung, his wife, smiling beside a younger version of him in uniform, Emily just a toddler in her arms. The memory pressed hard against his chest. He whispered softly, "I promised you I'd keep her safe. I won't fail her again." He closed the box gently, almost reverently, then pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in years, a local lawyer named Patterson, an old friend from his time with the Veterans Outreach. The line clicked, a pause, then a voice. Jack spoke quietly, his tone steady, deliberate. "I need to know what my options are. Something happened at my daughter's school." There was another pause, then the voice on the other end answered, low and firm. "I'll come by in the morning." Jack exhaled slowly, relief tinged with resolve. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, the Carter house fell silent, except for the soft rhythm of Rex's breathing from the living room. Emily, finally asleep, had left a small blanket draped over him. The old dog stirred, his tail twitching faintly as if chasing a dream of running fields and open air. Jack stood in the doorway, watching them both. His eyes softened. The soldier in him had learned that peace wasn't quiet. It was the moment between storms, when love stood guard over what was left to protect. The morning broke gray and cold, the kind of day that promised no comfort. Jack Carter stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his olive jacket. The reflection staring back at him looked steady, but the muscles in his jaw betrayed tension. On the kitchen table lay a neatly arranged stack of papers, veterinary reports, photographs of Rex's wounds, and the printout of an email from the town lawyer, David Patterson, confirming their appointment at the school that morning. Emily was still asleep, curled beside Rex, whose breathing had steadied overnight. Jack bent down, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and whispered something only a father would say in silence. He straightened, gathered the documents, and stepped into the cold light outside. The morning wind carried a chill sharper than the steel inside him. At Cedar Ridge Elementary, the parking lot was already half full. Cars lined the curb in a neat row, the school flag limp against a windless sky. Inside the administration building, voices murmured behind closed doors. The meeting had been called early, before classes began, under the guise of addressing recent concerns. Jack walked in with steady steps, followed by Patterson, a tall, composed man in his 50s with silver hair and clear glasses. His presence was quiet but commanding, the sort that filled a room without raising its volume. The assistant principal, Evan Grant, was already seated at the head of the conference table, his suit pressed, his posture too perfect. His expression carried the kind of calm that came from routine authority, not conscience. Two teachers, a school counselor, and a district representative sat nearby, shuffling papers without looking up. Evan greeted him with a practiced smile. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. Let's all remember, this is about understanding, not confrontation." Jack placed the folder on the table and said evenly, "Then you'll have no problem understanding what's in here." He slid the documents across, the photos of Rex's raw, reddened skin, the medical report noting chemical burns, and the printed transcript from the veterinarian's notes. Patterson opened his briefcase and added a USB drive. "There's also video evidence," he said calmly. Evan hesitated, glancing at the drive as if it might bite. "We've heard about a recording," he began, "but as far as the school is concerned, that was never officially received." His voice smoothed the edges of the truth into something palatable. "Children make mistakes. What matters is that we move on." Jack's voice stayed low, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "Moving on doesn't heal what you refuse to see." He tapped the photos lightly with one finger. "That dog protected my daughter from being humiliated, and for that, he was punished. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for accountability." The room fell quiet. Evan's composure wavered for half a second before he leaned forward, adopting the careful tone of a man who believed diplomacy could erase conscience. "Mr. Carter, Emily's a remarkable child," he said, the words sounding rehearsed. "But you must understand, sometimes children with special conditions draw attention. It's important not to overreact. She's just a disabled girl who needs a little extra care, not a cause for alarm." The words landed like a slap. Patterson turned sharply toward Evan, his brow furrowing. But Jack moved first. His hand came down hard on the table, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. Papers jumped, coffee rippled in cups, every head turned. For a moment, no one breathed. Jack's voice came out low and shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of control. "Don't you ever talk about my daughter like that again." His knuckles were white against the wood. "She's not a condition. She's a child, a brave one. And if this school can't see the difference, then maybe it's not the kids who need teaching." Silence spread through the room like smoke. Evans swallowed hard, his confidence faltering, his face pale beneath the fluorescent light. Patterson cleared his throat softly, cutting through the tension. "We'll be filing a formal complaint with the district," he said, "and we'll provide this evidence as part of that process." Evan nodded stiffly, murmuring something about procedures. The meeting ended in fragments, people leaving without eye contact, their chairs scraping awkwardly across the floor. Outside, the hall smelled faintly of pencil shavings and disinfectant. Jack stood there for a long moment, the pulse in his temple steadying as he drew a deep breath. Patterson placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did what you needed to," he said quietly. Jack nodded once. "Not enough," he murmured. By late afternoon, the quiet town of Cedar Ridge began to stir with whispers. Somewhere in a bedroom lit by the glow of a phone screen, Noah Matthews sat on the edge of his bed, the curtains drawn tight. His fingers hovered over the upload button. He had rewatched the video a dozen times, the laughter, the shove, the moment Rex barked, and then Jack's calm, devastating silence. The title box blinked. He typed, "Robot Girl and Her Dog." His heart pounded as he pressed post. Within hours it spread, first among students, then parents, then beyond the small town's borders. The clip played on phones, shared through messages, whispered about in grocery stores and church parking lots. People cried, others grew angry. A few defended the boys, calling it exaggeration, but most saw it for what it was, a wound made visible. The following day, Jack stood outside the grocery store when a woman approached him. She was a parent from another class, eyes red, voice trembling. "I saw the video," she said. "Your daughter. She's so brave." He thanked her softly, but her words didn't bring peace. By evening, local news picked it up. A headline scrolled across social media. "Veteran's daughter bullied at local school." The phone rang until Jack unplugged it. Some calls offered support. Others carried venom disguised as outrage. "You're exploiting this," one message said. "Kids make mistakes. You're turning them into monsters." At dusk, a letter arrived, official and cold. The school board's seal at the top. It stated in careful language that until further notice, non-service animals would not be allowed on school grounds. It was a verdict dressed in bureaucracy, but Jack read the truth beneath it. Rex was banned. He folded the letter slowly, slid it into his pocket, and said nothing. Emily stood at the doorway watching him, confusion clouding her blue eyes. "Does that mean Rex can't come with me anymore?" she asked. Jack knelt and pulled her close. "Just for a while, sweetheart," he said, voice steady, though something inside him cracked. "They'll understand one day." That night, rain fell against the windows in steady, cold streams. The air inside the house smelled faintly of damp fur and coffee. Rex lay curled on the rug, his breathing heavy but rhythmic. Jack sat beside him, the soft lamplight casting long shadows across the floor. Emily had fallen asleep against his arm, her small hand gripping his sleeve. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the distant hills. Jack stared at the faint reflection of their trio in the glass, the soldier, the child, and the dog who had given everything without asking. He whispered, almost to himself, "People think strength means fighting back, but real strength is holding on when every part of you wants to give up." The storm pressed against the walls like a heartbeat. Jack stayed there long after Emily's breathing evened into dreams, one hand resting on Rex's fur, feeling its warmth. The night was long, but in that quiet corner of the house, beneath the hum of rain and the weight of injustice, he found a strange kind of calm, the calm of a man who refused to surrender to darkness, not when love was still standing beside him. Morning sunlight broke gently across Cedar Ridge Elementary, brushing the playground with gold that felt too calm for what it covered. At the gate, a new white sign had been bolted into place, the black letters bold and cold against the iron. "No animals allowed." It glared beneath the morning light, indifferent to the hearts it hurt. Emily Carter stood before it quietly, her crutches planted firmly on the sidewalk, her face pale and unreadable. The breeze tugged at the hem of her navy skirt. She didn't cry, didn't ask questions. She only turned to look at the road beyond the gate, where a gray pickup truck sat parked beneath the shade of a sycamore tree. Behind its windshield, a familiar silhouette watched silently. Inside the truck, Jack Carter sat motionless, his hands gripping the steering wheel, jaw tight beneath the brim of his black cap. In the back seat, Rex lay curled, his ears perked, eyes following Emily through the open gate. The dog whined softly, pressing his nose against the glass, leaving foggy imprints shaped like worry. Jack reached back and stroked his neck. "Easy, buddy," he whispered. "She's fine. Just watch." His voice was low, but it trembled around the edges. He watched his daughter limp toward the entrance, balancing carefully on her crutches, her hair catching the morning light. For a man who had crossed deserts and war zones, this, doing nothing, was the hardest battle yet. By mid-morning, Cedar Ridge was humming with the restless excitement of a school trip. The annual outdoor field day, planned for weeks, had finally arrived. Buses lined the parking lot, teachers calling names over the chatter of children. Emily stood in her small group, her backpack strapped tight, her prosthetic leg shining faintly under the sun. She smiled when she saw Noah waving from the crowd, his hair tousled by the wind. A few of the boys who once taunted her now looked away, their laughter muted by memory. From a hill overlooking the parking lot, Jack's truck sat again, distant but unwavering. He and Rex watched as the buses rolled out, following at a careful distance when the convoy pulled toward the edge of town. The park sat nestled beside a stretch of forest and an open meadow that sloped gently toward a narrow stream. The air was filled with the sweet scent of pine and the rhythmic call of cicadas. Teachers unpacked picnic baskets while children scattered across the grass, chasing frisbees and laughter. Jack parked on a small ridge overlooking the field. Through a pair of compact binoculars, he watched Emily laugh beside Noah as they tried to toss rings onto wooden stakes. Rex sat beside him, alert but calm, tail sweeping the grass. "We stay here," Jack murmured, "just watching." He reached into the cooler for a bottle of water, his eyes never leaving the field. Rex's gaze was fixed on Emily too, every muscle poised between patience and instinct. The sound of joy carried easily through the open air, but beneath it, Jack noticed something shift. An unfamiliar rhythm, a tremor in the laughter. He lifted the binoculars again. Near the stream, a group of children had wandered too close to the edge. Among them was Tyler, the freckled boy who once poured soda over Rex. He was tossing a frisbee, shouting for someone to catch it, his sneakers skimming dangerously close to the muddy bank. Another boy called for him to stop, but Tyler only laughed. In that moment of mischief, his foot slid. Jack saw it before anyone else, the twist of his ankle, the brief flail of arms, and then the splash. The sound reached late, muffled by distance, but Jack was already moving. The binoculars dropped to the grass. "Stay, Rex!" he commanded, but the word barely left his mouth before the German shepherd leapt from the open window. Rex hit the slope running, his body a streak of motion and memory. Jack cursed under his breath, threw open the door, and followed, his boots cutting through the wet grass. Down below, panic rippled through the field. Children screamed. The teachers rushed forward, their voices tangled with shock. The stream, shallow in most places, was swollen from rain the night before, its current stronger than it looked. Tyler's head bobbed once, then vanished beneath the churned water. Jack reached the fence at the edge of the field just as Rex plunged into the stream. The dog swam powerfully, his legs cutting through the current with relentless precision. Jack vaulted the fence, the metal scraping his sleeve, and splashed into the water seconds later. The cold bit deep into his chest, but his focus was absolute. "Hold on, boy," he shouted, not to Tyler but to Rex, whose jaws were already clenched around the boy's collar. The dog's eyes, wide and fierce, turned briefly toward Jack as if asking for strength. Jack reached them in 3 strokes, wrapped his arm around Tyler's shoulders, and together, man and dog dragged him toward the embankment. The mud sucked at their boots, the current tugging hard, but Jack's grip didn't falter. He pulled, inch by inch, until they reached the bank. When he finally lifted Tyler from the water, the boy was coughing, his small frame shivering violently. Rex staggered beside them, drenched, his chest heaving, eyes darting back toward the others approaching. Evan Grant was the first to arrive, his polished shoes slipping on the mud, his voice thin with disbelief. "My God," he breathed, "he's alive." Children huddled behind him, their faces pale, eyes wide. The red-haired boy's voice cracked as he said, "It's Mr. Carter. He saved him." For once, there was no trace of mockery, no laughter, only awe. Jack sat back on the grass, catching his breath, one hand resting on Rex's soaked fur. Evan knelt beside him, the clean fabric of his trousers streaked with dirt. His voice trembled between guilt and realization. "A father and a dog we banned just saved my student." Jack looked up, his eyes tired but calm. "I'm not here to prove anything," he said quietly. "I just didn't want anyone else to get hurt like she did." His words fell softly, carried by the breeze, but they struck harder than any reprimand. Evan looked away, shame flickering across his face. Around them, silence grew heavy, filled with the sound of running water and distant birds. Through the crowd, Emily broke free from Noah's side. She moved as fast as her crutches would carry her, her steps uneven but unyielding. When she reached them, she dropped one crutch and knelt beside Rex, her arms wrapping around his neck. "You did it, Rex," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy and relief. The dog leaned into her, tail wagging weakly, his body still shaking from the cold. Noah, breathless, lifted his phone again, not to expose, not to shame, but to capture what mattered, the image of a dripping dog, a weary father, and a girl who believed in both. Around them, something in the air shifted. The children who once mocked stood still, some biting their lips, others wiping their eyes. Even Evan's voice broke when he finally said, "Bring him a blanket." A teacher rushed to fetch one. Jack looked at Emily, smiled faintly, and brushed her damp hair back. For once, he didn't need to say anything. The world had finally seen what he'd always known, that love and loyalty don't need permission to do what's right. As the ambulance siren echoed faintly in the distance, the sunlight broke fully through the clouds. The sign at the school gate would still stand for now, but its meaning had already begun to crumble. And on that small, grassy hill by the stream, where fear had almost taken another child, a father, a daughter, and a dog had rewritten what it meant to belong. A week had passed since the rescue, and Cedar Ridge Elementary looked different beneath the soft light of a late afternoon sun. The playground had been cleaned, the broken branches near the stream replaced by colorful flags, and at the entrance, the sign that once read, "No Animals Allowed," had quietly been taken down. In its place hung a banner fluttering gently in the wind. Day of Kindness, a celebration of courage and compassion. The schoolyard was alive with voices, parents talking in low tones, children laughing freely, teachers carrying boxes of flowers to the stage. On the front lawn, rows of folding chairs gleamed under the sunlight, and in the very first row sat Jack Carter with his daughter Emily beside him, and Rex lying at her feet, his sable coat brushed clean, a soft green scarf around his neck, embroidered with the words, "Silent Hero." Emily sat straight on her crutches, her eyes bright, though her expression carried a quiet weight. Every few seconds she reached down to touch Rex's head, fingers running gently through his fur. The German shepherd looked peaceful, tail sweeping lazily, his amber eyes half closed. Jack, in his olive field jacket and black cap, sat silently beside her, his face calm but reflective. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the air, a sound that once carried pain, now softened by change. Around them, parents whispered to each other, their eyes occasionally glancing toward the small family that had changed the way their town understood compassion. When the microphone crackled to life, the murmurs faded. On stage, Evan Grant, the assistant principal, stood beneath the banner. He looked different now, less composed, the stiffness of his usual confidence replaced by something humbler. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his voice unsteady as he began to speak. "For 20 years, I've taught lessons about discipline, teamwork, and achievement," he said slowly, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. "But it took one man, his daughter, and their dog to teach me the lesson I had somehow forgotten. Never stay silent when someone else is hurting." His voice wavered on the last word. For a moment, the only sound was the soft clinking of the flagpole against the breeze. Then came applause, quiet at first, then growing, not thunderous but steady and sincere. Evan stepped down from the stage and turned to where Jack and Emily sat. He hesitated, then bowed his head slightly, not as a teacher, but as a man. His eyes glistened faintly. Jack gave a small nod, the gesture of a soldier who understood redemption when he saw it. Emily smiled softly, one hand tightening around Rex's leash. The moment was brief, but it carried more weight than any speech could. After a short silence, a new figure stepped onto the stage. Tyler, the freckle-faced boy who once stood behind the laughter and later behind the fear. He wore his school uniform neatly today, his hair combed, his eyes nervous, but resolute. In his hands he held a folded piece of paper, but when he spoke, his voice came without reading. "Mr. Carter, Emily, Rex," he said, his throat tightening around the words. "I'm sorry. I thought it was funny. I didn't think about what I was doing or who I was hurting. If you and Rex hadn't been there that day, I wouldn't be standing here." His eyes fell. The crowd was silent. Jack stood slowly, one hand resting on Emily's shoulder. "The important thing," he said quietly, "is that you learned. Be grateful. Be kind. And next time, be the one who stands up." Tyler nodded, tears welling as the audience broke into gentle applause. As the sound faded, Evan returned to the microphone. "There's one more person we need to thank today," he said, his tone warmer now. "Because sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms or stand on battlefields. Sometimes they're just children who choose to do what's right." He gestured toward the audience. "Noah Matthews, would you come up here, please?" From the second row, Noah, small, slender, his brown hair slightly messy, rose hesitantly. The applause that followed was louder this time, full of pride. He climbed the steps, his shoes scuffing lightly on the wood, and took his place beside Evan. "You reminded us all that truth matters," Evan said. "Thank you for your courage." Noah's face flushed red as he smiled toward the crowd. Down below, Emily looked up and whispered, "I'm proud of you." He heard it, and for the first time, believed it. When the applause subsided, Evan gestured for the final speaker to come forward. Jack Carter rose slowly, his tall frame moving toward the stage with quiet dignity. As he reached the microphone, a hush fell over the crowd. He adjusted the brim of his cap and looked out at the faces before him, students, teachers, parents, strangers. His voice came low and steady, carrying the weight of memory and truth. "I used to believe that war taught me what strength meant," he began. "That survival was about endurance, about how long you could stand before falling. But I've learned that true strength isn't in fighting. It's in compassion. It's in choosing kindness when anger would be easier. It's in teaching our children that bravery doesn't need a battlefield, just a heart that refuses to turn away." His words lingered in the air long after he stepped down. The crowd stood in silence for a heartbeat before the applause rose again, rolling across the courtyard like a wave. Some parents wiped their eyes, others reached for their children's hands. Emily smiled up at her father, eyes shimmering. Rex barked once as if to punctuate the moment, tail sweeping the ground in rhythm with the applause. As the ceremony closed, the school band began to play a soft tune, something hopeful, something that belonged to mornings brighter than this one. Emily, standing with her crutches, turned to Rex. "Come on, boy," she whispered, and together they began to walk across the courtyard. Noah joined them, his small hand steadying her arm as they moved between rows of smiling faces. This time, there were no whispers, no laughter, only cheers, clapping, and hands reaching out to pet Rex as they passed. The dog accepted each touch quietly, his eyes gentle, his spirit calm. Near the stage, Evan stepped down and walked toward Jack. They met halfway. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Evan extended his hand. "You did what I should have done from the start," he said softly. Jack shook his hand firmly. "It's not too late, sir. We've still got kids to teach what's right." The two men stood there in silence, the noise of celebration swirling around them like wind through tall grass. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close. As the sun began to set behind the school roof, Cedar Ridge glowed with the amber warmth of early evening. The air carried the faint scent of grass and summer promises. Emily sat under a maple tree at the edge of the yard, leaning gently against Rex, her hand resting on his fur. Jack stood a few steps away, watching the two of them, the little girl who had taught a town what courage meant and the dog who had never needed words to prove his worth. For once, there was no weight on his shoulders, no battle waiting to be fought, just peace, fragile, real, and earned. And sometimes, the greatest acts of kindness happen quietly, in the spaces where no one is watching, in the choices that ask for nothing in return. True courage isn't loud, and love doesn't always wear a uniform. It's in the father who stays when things break, the child who forgives when it's hard, and the loyal soul who guards what words can't. The world may never sing their names, but because of them, it keeps its light. If this story touched something in you, take a moment to share your thoughts below. Maybe someone out there needs to hear them. And if you believe in compassion, in simple goodness that still exists around us, subscribe and stay with us. May God bless you and every quiet heart still fighting to keep love alive in this world.